Thank you. So I'm going to advise those in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode, and that all devices are to be muted. It is not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. So agenda item 1 is apologies. So we have apologies from John Blair and Daniel McCrossan. Anyone aware of any other apologies? No? Okay. And no members attending via Zoom that we're of? Okay. Declarations of interest. I would remind members of their responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. So do any members have any interest to declare in relation to any of today's agenda items?
Executor and owner of a small farm.
Okay.
Partner in the farm business.
Thank you, William. Thank you, Declan.
And a small farm holding and chair.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate it. Okay, chairperson's business is agenda item 3, members. I refer you to page 6 of the pack to the oral statement on the blue tongue virus, suspected blue tongue virus, which has now been confirmed in Northern Ireland, that the Minister made to the House on Monday. A 20-kilometre temporary control zone has been established around premises near Bangor. This zone, therefore, extends across Belfast Lough into Antrim. At this stage, following yesterday's update, we understand the test results for the initial 2 animals have been confirmed as BTV3, and testing has revealed suspected presence in a further 44 cattle. Firstly, our thoughts are with those affected, and I also echo the Minister's call for vigilance by farmers. Thank the Minister for contacting myself at the weekend in regard to this. Clearly, this is a very unwelcome addition to the list of animal health issues facing the Department, with recent concerns regarding Asian hornets, the spread of avian flu, and of course bovine TB. More of that in a moment. Members, I appreciate this may come up when the Minister is here, but committee members have heard some concerns regarding the timeline of this outbreak between notification and test results. I'm going to suggest that we write to the Department and seek clarity on the timeline, that the Department will have sufficient resources to manage this event, whatever the scale. Are members content? Yep. Thank you, members. Item number 2, on the subject of TB, we had an interesting and passionate informal event with farmers and the UFU representative on their concerns regarding the management of TB on Tuesday. There were a fair number of issues raised, and the issue dominated the Minister's questions immediately following our informal session. There is no minute of the event, but officials did take a note which will be distributed by email by the end of the week, members. A number of possible actions came out of the meeting, and before we hear from members who were there, I propose, with members' agreement, that we invite rural support to the committee to talk about their work, because it repeatedly came up about the mental distress the farmers were under, specifically in regard to TB. Are members agreed? Is there any other comments they want to make on that? Okay, members agreed. Yep, thank you, members. Yep, okay. Members, we did. We covered that.
Came out of that meeting, the informal meeting.
Okay.
They were saying that some lesions were being discovered and so on at slaughterhouse.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Another item that came out of that informal meeting was an option to invite the meat exporters to the committee to hear more from them about cattle making it to slaughterhouse before lesions are discovered and the impact it has for them. Members agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Agenda item 4 is the minutes of the meeting on the 27th of November. Members, I refer you to the draft minutes from our meeting dated the 27th of November, which start at page 16 of your pack. Members, have you any comments, or are you content with the minutes as drafted? And if so, I will sign them for publication on the website. Okay, members, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to move from agenda item 4 to agenda item 6, because we have the Minister and the Perm Sec, and I think the Deputy Chief Veterinary Officer. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to go to agenda item 6 and make best use of the time with the Minister this morning, which is a Ministerial Evidence Session. It's an update on the legislative programme, current issues and future plans. So members, I now welcome Minister Muir and Mrs Katrina Godfrey, the Perm Sec, from DAERA, and David Kyle, the Deputy Chief Veterinary Officer, to brief the committee and answer any questions we may have. Minister, you are very welcome. As you might imagine, we have a great deal of ground to cover, and I understand you're limited to an hour, so if you're ready to please give the committee your update. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Chair, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to brief the committee this morning. I'm joined by my Permanent Secretary, Katrina Godfrey, and also David Kyle, who's one of our Deputy Chief Veterinary Officers. As I hope you and members know, I and my officials value engagement with the committee and are keen to support you in your important role that you undertake with regards to scrutiny of my department. Today is an opportunity for me to share with you some of the key areas we've been working on across the department, and also set out the work programme we have in place for the months ahead. I want to start by updating the committee on the position with regards to blue tongue. As members will know, 2 suspect cases of blue tongue virus were recently detected in cattle near Bangor, leading to the creation of a 20-kilometre temporary control zone where strict movement restrictions and surveillance have been implemented for affected farms. The suspect cases have now been confirmed. Preliminary testing has now confirmed blue tongue in 44 out of 236 cattle on the impacted farm, prompting ongoing epidemiological investigations and collaboration with local, UK and Irish authorities to contain the outbreak. We are maintaining close ongoing contact with the Ulster's Farmers Union and NIAPA and with the wider agri-food community. Whilst blue tongue poses no risk to public safety or food safety, it is really important that I stress the need for farmers to abide by the restrictions now in place and to remain extra vigilant. This is a virus and it can affect cattle, sheep and other animals, and any concerns need to be reported to your vet and notified to DAERA. I'd also appreciate the help of the committee members in spreading these important messages. We'll be happy to answer any questions on this and indeed any other topics as we go through today's session. Returning to other matters, the committee will know that our DAERA corporate plan has a clear focus on achieving a net zero, nature positive future, supporting sustainable agriculture and thriving rural communities. In terms of sustainable agriculture, Northern Ireland's agri-food and fishing sectors are the backbone of our economy and our identity. They create jobs, sustain communities and produce food of exceptional quality. My commitment is clear: to support these sectors to become a more sustainable, more resilient and more productive so they can remain a valued and important part not only of our economy but also of the fabric of society here and continue to shape and define Northern Ireland on a world stage. I'm committed to investing the executive earmarked funding of over £330 million for agriculture, agri-environment, fisheries and rural development in a way that delivers real impact and outcomes. From the 1st of January, the new Farm Sustainability Payment and Farm Sustainability Standards will go live, and this provides a key pillar within the overall programme as a safety net for farm businesses, and this is just the beginning. In 2026, we will set out on an ambitious pathway for livestock genetics, capital support, horticulture and a Farm with Nature package which will support our farmers as valued custodians of the countryside. Animal health is also a part of this, and it is not a side issue. It is central to our farming future. We're committed to taking a One Health approach. I know the level of interest on this issue, and as I've highlighted in relation to blue tongue, we will keep you informed. On bovine TB, the burden is unacceptable for farm families and for government. That is why I initiated a comprehensive review led by the Chief Veterinary Officer, resulting in the TB Partnership Steering Group's blueprint for eradication. Work is already underway in 5 key areas, including wildlife intervention and testing. And I will not be doing this alone. €6.4 million of shared island funding from the Irish Government will support a new cross-border TB initiative. Engagement with farmers continues, and details of the regionalisation pilot will be confirmed shortly. On animal welfare, our Animal Welfare Pathway is the most ambitious programme in a decade. We are progressing Lucy's Law, reviewing dog breeding regulations and preparing consultations on microchipping, dog licensing and shock collars. With regards to climate change, addressing the impact of climate change in a fair and just manner remains one of my top priorities. Climate action is not simply a challenge, it is an opportunity to realise our vision for a sustainable future across all sectors. We need to both mitigate against and adapt to our changing climate. We can choose to lead, or we can drag our heels and feel the consequences. I choose leadership. We have built a credible climate action plan grounded in science and evidence. Across government, we have also developed our 3rd Northern Ireland Climate Change Adaptation Programme, which I hope to publish shortly following executive consideration. The cost of inaction, economic, social and environmental, is far greater than the cost of inaction. Our legal obligations and emissions targets aren't just numbers, they're commitments to future generations. I've repeatedly said that we need to make sure that transition is done in a fair and just way. The time to set up an independent Just Transition Commission is now. Regulations will hopefully soon reach the Assembly, paving the way for appointments, and look forward to supporting the committee in scrutinising of those regulations and as we move forward in terms of ensuring that a just transition is at the core of what we do. Additionally, I've allocated £12.3 million to a Just Transition Fund for Agriculture in the financial year to support farmers with advice, guidance and financial assistance. I'm engaging with the Finance Minister in relation to further support in the years ahead. I want to turn also to the issue of environmental governance. For too long, our environment and nature have suffered from a lack of robust protection. Issues like Loch Ness, I'm a Boy are stark reminders of what happens when governance fails. That's why I commissioned the independent review of environmental governance and why I fully support establishing an independent environmental protection agency. I'm glad that the majority of Assembly supported this, and I will continue to engage with the Executive in regards to this. It is deeply disappointing that there has been no agreement on this at the Executive to date. The Environmental Principles Policy Statement has gained Executive approval, embedding prevention, precaution and polluter pays into policy making, and I know you'll hear from officials after our session in regards to that. This is an important intervention, putting the environment at the core of policy making. In terms of legislation, our seas, rivers and lakes are precious natural assets that are integral to our livelihoods, culture and the economy. I will therefore be bringing forward a Fisheries and Water Environment Bill to modernise enforcement and protect marine and freshwater ecosystems. I also note the committee has begun its oral evidence sessions as part of the scrutiny process for the Department's dilapidation bill. I welcome this, and my officials and I look forward to working closely with the committee as it continues its detailed scrutiny of the bill, and I do welcome that scrutiny. It's been very constructive. In terms of Loch Ness, the Loch Ness Action Plan includes 37 actions, 15 delivered, 22 progressing. This is progress, but collaboration across departments remains key and big decisions are on the horizon. In terms of afforestation, delivering 12% forest cover by 2050 remains a priority. I have therefore commissioned a Northern Ireland Tree Action Plan expected to be completed in spring of next year. With regards to rural affairs, over £7 million in rural grants this year will support communities tackling poverty and isolation. A new rural policy for Northern Ireland, Rural NI, our new approach, 2026 to 2041, is being developed to provide a flexible, cross-cutting framework for emerging challenges. In relation to the Windsor Framework, we should be very proud of the opportunities that exist in Northern Ireland for dual market access, and it's something that has been something I'm very keen to promote. Members will be aware that negotiations between the UK and EU on an SPS agri-food agreement are underway. Following an initial round last month, a second round took place on Monday, and a further round is planned shortly. I want to see arrangements that allow agri-food goods to move from GBDNI with the least possible friction. I continue to press the UK Government to pursue the highest achievable level of dynamic alignment with these EU regulations. This is essential for an agreement that is practical, sustainable and implemented swiftly, providing the clarity and certainty our businesses urgently need. I will continue to engage with the UK Government on this agri-food agreement. Is something I want to see over the line. In conclusion, Chair, what we have already achieved demonstrates real progress and ambition. But let me be clear, challenges remain. I think we all know that. We cannot duck them. Facing them directly together will allow us to build a sustainable and prosperous future for everyone. Chair, that concludes my introductory remarks. I and my officials are happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. I really appreciate our time, and we'll try and stay keep the questions as short as possible, but there will be plenty of them. I'm sure you'll be glad to know. If you don't mind, I'm going to just stay on the animal diseases first of all. I think that's one of your most significant short-term pressures, and it touches into the funding piece as well, because obviously there is a finite pot. Do you foresee, in regard to compensation, whether it's blue tongue, TB, the avian flu, that you will be making any additional bids before the next financial year? Do you see yourself having to dip into any other internal pots to meet those demands?
We're very conscious there are statutory obligations that we have to discharge in regards to these areas that you've outlined. Also acutely aware of the financial situation we have in Northern Ireland. But what I'll do is I will work through it in our department, and if there's a need to engage with the Finance Minister, we'll do that. Our focus, to be honest, is in terms of managing these diseases, particularly in relation to blue tongue, and then we will engage around any compensation levels that are required around this. We also have to be aware in terms of blue tongue, and David might want to come in a wee bit in relation to this, that in terms of the epidemiological picture around this, that in terms of widespread culling, that is not the response to this. This is in terms of a disease that's spread through the midge population.
Do you mind if before we get into, I do want to talk about blue tongue and the advice, okay, but I want to finish out the financial question first, if you don't mind, and we will give adequate time to David in terms of that, because I really want to make sure we have as much information out there. But on the financial piece, if you don't mind, is it envisaged that there is enough, that you're anticipating to have enough money in year, or will you be making an additional bid?
Yeah, and I think Chair of the Committee was briefed on December monitoring last week. My understanding is there is unlikely to be an opportunity for departments to make bids, given the exceptionally serious pressures facing health education, frontline policing. So we will have to do everything we can first to make sure that any costs we incur, we reprioritise within our own budgets to meet them. As the Minister says, we keep in contact at multiple levels with the Department of Finance. If things get truly exceptional, then those are conversations I think Minister to Minister will take place. But we're very clear in our responsibilities. I have to make sure that the Department lives within the budget allocated to it, and that may mean difficult decisions down the line, but we're committed to discharging our responsibilities in that regard.
And this is the final one, just on the budget, because you answered a question very honestly and openly, because obviously you have to in regard to what that compensation looks like for blue tongue, which is slightly different than it is for TB. It's half the value of the animal. I believe 50% of the market share. That being the case, to use an example, there are now 44 other potentials. So someone could see a wipeout of a herd, potentially, and the compensation scheme at the moment would give them half the value. And there are also difficulties for businesses potentially to recreate a herd, which is something we heard even around TB. So is there any scope that you as Minister and your team would be looking at a review of that compensation scheme?
That's set in primary legislation. Yeah. Okay. Can I just say it's really important we set this out. The blue tongue is very different than other diseases such as TB, and do you want to come in a wee bit around this, because this is absolutely critical?
Yeah, I really think we need to avoid alarming herd keepers in the area. At the moment, and given the information we have, there would be no intention to cull these animals because we don't see any veterinary rationale. There's no epidemiological rationale for killing these animals. They don't pose any greater significant risk to other herds. This is an extremely well managed herd, very, very biosecure. The issue here is that we are fearing that there are midge infections, and you just can't control a midge population, as you know. So no, for the moment, and we'd never say never. I mean, we're undertaking quite an extensive of surveillance at pace to try and establish more evidence, and our advice to the Minister will be to take decisions which are really based on the best science available.
Okay, and just to extend that out just into, so obviously it's a dairy herd, so it presents a less of a risk to something that's in the beef space. So if it was beef, for instance, which was ready for sale, for market, they can't hold on to them indefinitely either. So what would happen in that instance?
Well, just to reiterate, ensure that public are very aware that there is no food safety risk from this, or no public health risk from this. And animals can go to slaughter, and milk can be collected and processed for human consumption. So there are provisions to allow animals to go for direct slaughter. Travel through a market would be limited at this stage, and there is a market in the area, and unfortunately their activities had to be suspended for the time being.
I would imagine those instances would be really high levels of biosecurity for moving an animal from a herd if it had to go to market that was...
If it goes to slaughter, they have to be taken under a designation scheme and slaughtered as quickly as possible once they arrive, to ensure that there's no potential risk of spread. But we have to also remember that for most of the province, we're actually under in a pretty much a vector low period.
Yes.
So midge activity is limited, and therefore local risk of spread at various different abattoir sites is limited also.
Okay.
I think you just said out, this is in some ways a flagship farm. It's excellent biosecurity. There's no clinical signs in relation to the cattle in question. The cattle, in terms of the infection has been uncovered in terms of proven positive, in terms of blue tongue. They will largely recover from this. So, and it's really, really important to say There is no implications in relation to public health or food safety.
Okay.
This is a separate, entirely separate issue.
Minister, there's been an ongoing concern in terms of the vacancy rates within the department. I think we got a figure last week in around 890. Specifically looking at managing crisis like this, are you concerned, or is there a concern that the department have the requisite amount of vets or inspectors, or is there any weakness in that space to deal and to resource an issue like this?
Let Katrina come in, but just to reassure everyone that this is a priority for the department. I've been clear in my diary. Officials have been focused upon this, and we'll continue to do that. Katrina could come in a wee bit in terms of
vacancies, as I think you will have seen, Chair, and as colleagues in other committees will know, are a significant source of concern for all of us and for me and my colleagues. Our rate continues to go down, so it's down to closer to 800 now. There are a number of vacancies on the veterinary side, most of them in relation to our responsibilities under the Windsor framework, but still nonetheless, like everywhere else, we find it challenging to recruit and retain veterinary professional colleagues. And that does mean that we have to prioritise and reprioritise. So as the Minister says, when something like this happens, we need to make sure that we have the right people in the right place. And David and his teams and Brian as Chief Vet work tirelessly in that regard. Would I like to have more vets? Absolutely. But I'm conscious that there is a shortage across, I think, most of Europe. And
you got a figure for this specific area of work in terms of inspectors and vets? Have you a figure for the shortages?
I know that I have 62 vacancies that are not Windsor framework in the wider group, but I don't have the breakdown, Chair, and unless David knows, in terms of the makeup of those vacancies immediately to hand. They will be a mixture. Some of them will be professional veterinary staff, some of them will be inspectors, some of them will be admin staff.
We are very conscious of the fact that we need to recruit more vets, and we are exceptionally lucky and proud of the staff that we have,
absolutely,
who are working incredibly hard at the moment to deal with blue tongue, and also not to forget avian influenza, which has been quite an enormous strain, and especially the frontline staff. They've been absolutely fantastic in their commitment. We've got teams working around the clock, and the province is very lucky to have such a dedicated veterinary service. And
I appreciate that. And there's a concern raised, I suppose, you'd have heard it when I was touching on the report that we did in the informal on TB about rural supporting our farmers, but I'm very aware that your staff too will be under immense pressure.
Absolutely.
And our steps being taken to support the staff, because I imagine the workload at the moment for inspectors and vets will be considerable. And is there support mechanisms within the department?
It's a really good question, Chair, and I have to say our colleagues in the Department of Finance are excellent. So we have welfare services in place at multiple levels. Some of them will be around building resilience and support. Some of them will be around direct one-to-one help. We have a responsiveness in terms of helplines and staff. We're also really well served by outside organisations, including the Charity for Civil Servants, which will come in and, in fact, in the very, very awful circumstances that we had earlier in the year with colleagues in Inishkeen House, those services, I think it's fair to say, David, were so responsive to the needs of staff and are continuing to offer that support. So one of the things that I think we always have to look at is, are we signposting them well enough? You can signpost, but actually it's the day that I need it signposted. So it's something we'll keep under review. But credit to Department of Finance colleagues. They have put a lot of work and effort into improving those services for staff right across the NICS.
I've got three short ones, if you don't mind, because I'm conscious that the members, I'm eating into their time as well. In regard to, and you did take a question to this, Minister, this week, the 1st of January, obviously the agreement in around medicines changes, but now what is brought into even sharper focus is that we still don't know the list of the potential drugs that may be affected, although we're told and promised that it's a small list. But it would occur to me that, for instance, where vaccination is an option, and I asked maybe David could give us a bit of advice in terms of blue tongue, that we don't know if, for instance, comfortably, or maybe you do know, whether this would be under threat on the 1st of January, that the vaccination, for instance, for blue tongue is definitely not on the list, or it is on the list, and it would also, we know that there's a mitigation in the agreement which says to prevent undue suffering, but as you've said, animals aren't suffering because of this necessarily, so it wouldn't trip the internal safeguard. So is there any certainty we can get in regard to this?
It's important at the outset I outline that this does not sit under my direction and control. This sits with DAERA. There is schemes been put in place by the UK government, 2 schemes in light of the fact that the grace period ends at the end of this year. The issue in terms of the availability of vaccine for blue tongue, I do not perceive that to be a challenge in regards to access. If it does, I will engage with the UK government and we'll work through it. The focus at the moment in relation to blue tongue has to be in terms of that vigilance and that surveillance and that quick reporting of any ill animals and also the isolation of those. That's where the focus has to be at the moment. I understand the concerns in relation to veterinary medicines. I met with the UK government last week and I continue to engage with them on it.
I know that the advice is it's commercially sensitive and therefore it doesn't exist, but it would occur to me, and I certainly would be keen for us to write even to DEFRA to put this on as a known risk, because we've learnt in the past that neither Brussels nor the UK government sometimes listen to the concerns that we have here, and we need to be robust and proactive in that space. So two shorter ones, if you don't mind. Could you give us an update on the supply and sale of puppies consultation, and is there any timeline for the work on that or legislation potentially?
So you're referring to Lucy's Law in terms of third-party sale.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that consultation has been underway. I met with officials, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, just to go through initial themes that are coming back from that. I'm going to get then through from them formal submission with regards to the way forward. We have to listen to the feedback around it all, and there's a differential between puppies and kittens as well in terms of how we deal with this. So we're going to consider that coming through, and then we'll engage obviously with the committee in terms of our proposals in regards to it. It's important we take action on this. It's a significant issue of concern. There's also, in terms of an expert review being undertaken in terms of breeding establishments, and intend to engage with them over the time ahead as well. These are key issues for us. This also is an example of where we can use secondary legislation to deliver benefit for the citizens of Northern Ireland, and that's where the animal welfare pathway is focused around. We've also engaged with the UK government on this issue of Lucy's Law as well, because I'm conscious in terms of Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom. Okay,
and this is my final one, guys. So it's around shared environmental services. We've written out to them, I think the last time they were in front of the committee was 2021, before my time. We've written out to them on a number of issues, but there's certainly now issues around shared environmental services of their remit and how the structure sits in and around that, because I believe they sit under Department of Communities, Infrastructure and DAERA in different ways. Could you give me as chair or the committee a wee bit of a better understanding of where they sit with regard to their remit to DAERA and how the interaction happens in terms of for them applying policy and legislation?
Shared environmental services, as from my understanding, there's a number of councils that have come together to collaborate on that. That's part of the planning process, and obviously it would sit within infrastructure. The role that my department plays in terms of Northern Ireland Environment Agency is the statutory consultee, and we respond to the decision maker, often district councils, in regards to that. I know some of the feedback has came back to me in relation to ammonia, that people want to have better access to advice, and we will consider over the time ahead what more we can do in terms of Northern Ireland Environment Agency to provide advice so that people are aware of what the rules are, what they're required to put in terms of an application. So we understand that sits with us, but shared environmental services, and Katrina will know this as previously Permanent Secretary in Infrastructure, sits in terms of
it is a creation
planning,
of the councils and a way in which the councils can access their own advice as planning authorities.
Okay, no problem. Well, thank you very much for that. Declan.
Thank you, Chair. I'll sort of pick up on the last theme there. We have been lobbied a lot lately about poultry farm applications being held up in the system, and the issue of dealing with the litter from those farms. You know, there's a lot of farms that I know in my area and other places where there are farms in the south of Ireland who want this, who need this litter. And Minister, you said it yourself in statements recently that in the southern half of the island, there is a P deficit, whereas in the northern part of the island there's a P surplus. So, Minister, there seems to be an issue where, and I know that my colleague Martin Kenny in the Dáil has raised this. I know, and even outside ourselves, I know Emma Sheeran has also raised it with SES and others. There seems to be some sort of an issue with getting that sort of transboundary advice to resolve that issue, and and I'm aware that your department has been lobbied with this as well. Is this something that you can shed a bit of light on and put a bit of focus on to try and resolve?
Okay, so I'm aware of the issue, and to be fair, Michelle has been raising it as well, as has William, and I understand the complexity with it, so it is extremely complex. I've asked officials for an update. I asked for that this week in terms of whereabouts it is. There's a role of shared environmental services, but also there's a role of NEA in regards to it. I don't know if anyone wants to say any more on this, Katrina, but it is something we need to be very conscious of in terms of the complexity of it.
Yeah, I know NIA has also indicated that it will reach out again to its counterparts in the south to see. I think the issue, Declan, as I understand it, is the difficulty in getting responses from those planning authorities on the other side in the border region, and NIA has undertaken to reach out again and see what information is missing. But there are clear complexities here around transboundary assessments.
Yeah. And I'm aware from correspondence that my colleague Emma Sheeran received from SES, that one of the asks is for yourselves to liaise directly with your counterparts in the south to resolve this. And I know that many of the farmers and representatives of the industry I've spoken to, they're making the case that air modelling is something that's required here, but it's not required in the south. And how can that's one of the things that needs to be resolved in terms of one of the impediments that need to be resolved. But I certainly think in the broader picture, if you have farms in another part of the island that needs this, and farms here that need to export it, then it's something that needs to be resolved, because it's really becoming a massive issue for the poultry sector.
Yeah. So if you're happy, we'll take this away, and then we'll write back to the committee in terms of reviewing this and whereabouts we are on it, if you would be happy with that.
Yeah. But that matches absolutely my understanding, Declan, that NIA is getting back in touch to try and push a bit more on what's missing. Yeah,
and I think there is a delay from the National Parks and Wildlife responding to that there. And just before I just move on, sort of want to commend the swift approach you've taken in dealing with the blue tongue outbreak, and thank you for keeping in touch with us on that there. So well done on that. Are you any clear of where this originated from, Minister?
Well, I'll let David come in. I just want to say something, and you've said this in terms of the response. I want to commend both veterinary service officials, vets and officials in my department for their response to this. I've seen real examples of professionalism, and can I say to you, leadership that I will remember for the rest of my career, in terms of people who are working collaboratively as a team around this, and I want to thank them for that. The challenge around this is that because this is spread through the midge population, being able to get a definitive understanding of whereabouts it come from is not something we're going to be able to 100% nail. But you want to say a bit more about that, David?
And just to add to the comments of the Minister, the Agri-Food Biosciences Institute have been outstanding also.
Very quick.
And they're very responsive, working part of our team. We have good midge modelling data, which would have suggested high density plumes, not very frequently, but just intermittently through maybe September and October. We're actually meeting in focus there today to put a bit more detail in terms of the outcome of the specific results of the PCR and the serology testing, to understand from the blood results when animals were infected. And we will also lean very carefully on the expertise that Pirbright in the UK have in terms of their already developed understanding of what that might tell us in terms of when the disease was infected. But initial indication is that there was an initial incursion, which is then subsequently multiplied quite significantly in the local midge population.
Would I be correct in saying that basically the cooler the temperatures, the better it is to prevent the midges from spreading?
Yeah, so my aspiration for the weeks ahead
It's
is
to stay
really,
under 13 degrees.
Yeah, well, even lower ideally.
Lower.
Unfortunately, my desires for weather is very different to many citizens in Northern Ireland over the summer. I do want warm summers because I know the implication it has in Lough Neagh, and in the context of this, a really cold few weeks ahead would be absolutely ideal. But we can't bank on the weather here. What we have to do is we have to have that extreme vigilance. We have to have the surveillance and monitoring that we've got in place. We need to be able to get that picture back. And the cooperation we've had with the Ulster Farmers Union and IAPA has been really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And we're working very closely together on this. I think it's just important to clarify this wasn't through an imported animal.
No, this herd is very biosecure, rarely buys animals in, has the highest standards. So very, very, very secure. And I mean, we have 7 midge traps across the province, but then we've put a midge trap on this particular farm, and that demonstrates that you can have anomalies in local behaviour of the midges too. So we did find that there were active midges even this week. So despite the colder weather, we can still get recrudescence of this virus.
Sorry, holding Chair, but that's what I was curious to know, to come in animals, because I remember one time there was a Schmallenberg came in here, and I think it came in and up the Eastern Seaboard to here, and that's why I was curious as to how this one patch here has got the midges but not the rest of the Eastern Seaboard. So did it come across the sea, or how did the
modelling is really interesting to see, and it would show the plumes effect all along the Eastern Seaboard from the south of Ireland all the way up. So that's what's leading us to think that this disease could be more prevalent out there than we were initially detecting, and that's what our surveillance is there to detect, how far it is spread.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Declan. Michelle?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation this morning. I think this type of engagement is really helpful, and I suppose maybe it's something that maybe we should have on a more frequent basis than we currently have. I suppose the initial questions will be in relation to blue tongue, and obviously the focus is very much on the control zone at the moment. Assuming that this has been in the herd for some time, I will also assume that there have been herd movements. Could you maybe confirm how many movements and if they are outside of the control zone?
Yeah, there have been. I can't give you a precise figure, but I can give you that later, Michelle. There have been some trace movements, and we've actually extended back the tracing window to the 1st of September at this stage. It was initially set at the 1st of October, but we think it could be longer than that. There hasn't been as many, given the type of enterprise, but all those traced animals have been restricted, and they will be tested, and that will give us more information. We've already tested one of the herds that had animals in the zone, which adds the even further complexity of it, that there will be keepers who have kept animals in the control zone who've taken those animals home now after the tracing window commenced. So it is a complex piece of work to do, and we just need to give a little bit of time that we're in a better position to give a full and further update.
Okay, so I mean, ultimately, if you're testing it with 20 random farms within the control zone, and then that sort of becomes a multiplier, so there could be tens of thousands of animals potentially need to be tested. Do you have capacity for the testing?
Yes, AFBI have assured us they can do a significant amount of testing for us. You do 300 PCR tests for us on a week. So that gives it, and the serology is much more than that, maybe over 1,000. So they are able to handle, but it is, we do need to be very careful in terms of how we schedule and organise our work with them.
So it's for the TB test and try to do it together at the same time?
Yes, I mean, the surveillance testing that we're doing, we're trying to align it up with TB tests that have already been scheduled and are underway. So before the end of the week, we will have a number of herd tests done. That's just trying to inconvenience farmers as little as possible.
Use resources sensibly.
And we also have that testing and surveillance from the abattoirs, so we'll get a picture back from that. Obviously, that's beef rather than dairy. But Yeah.
Very much a moving picture anyway. So,
It is.
following on from a question that the chair asked with regards to vets and the challenge, and we've had this conversation before, and I was just wondering whether there had been any reassessment done of salary scales for vets, because I'm very conscious of the fact what the department maybe pays compared to what a vet could earn in the private sector.
Yeah, there's a couple of pieces of work underway in that, one of which is looking at professions and specific professions across the civil service where we have evidence of recruitment and retention difficulties. Veterinary professionals is one of them, so the Department of Finance is leading on that. As you can imagine, you know, the bar to prove that civil servants need to pay more is not low, but that work is being taken forward by the Department of Finance. In a similar vein, we have been looking as well at all of our own staff structures. We've been looking at how we recruit. We've been looking at what we learn about people who leave us, and sometimes you're right, it is to go to other parts of the public sector or indeed to other governments, and what the differentials are. But one of the key things, and David might have his own perspective on this, that we do see is that some of the things that might 5, 6, 7 years ago have made the civil service and the public sector an attractive employer for veterinary colleagues are now being replicated across the private sector as well. So things that we would have had as almost our unique selling points around flexibility, around variety of work, around the ability to work part-time, those, David, are now being reflected much more in, you know, in what are now much bigger private practices, and that's another element of competition. And as well as that, we have a generational shift in the way younger people come into the workforce. So that sense of coming in to be a government vet or indeed a civil servant of any type and seeing this as your longer-term career, when we talk to students, and that's why our student placement scheme is so important, is we see very different attitudes to the world of work, going in, having a career for a while, going to do something different. And I don't know, David, if that's something, you know, that you're picking up as well, but certainly as we see younger people coming in, they're much more mobile than folk who came in to the civil service with me are. She said, being still here.
I think our veterinary service is rapidly changing and evolving, and is an incredibly diverse and really fascinating place to work. And that's the type of environment that younger graduates are really looking for, and they seek a lot of reward from the actual work that they're doing. So setting the pay side across, you know, and the rewards, that is something that I guess is slightly outside our remit, but work is going on ahead to progress what can be done. But what we're focused on is having a really well-led group of people who are really committed to serving the citizens here.
Yeah, and Brian and David and the top team very much leading a bit of a renewal programme to try and make sure that those posts are as fulfilling. Yeah. But as you know, as colleagues were reflecting earlier, they are at times incredibly demanding. You know, when we look at, and you mentioned avian influenza, when we look at what we ask staff to do and what they go out with a heart and a half to do, it is phenomenal.
Okay, thank you. Minister, the UFU passed a motion of no confidence in the department, and by extension yourself, who leads the department. Can I ask what tangible actions that you're taking in order to regain their confidence?
I was on the record at the time. I was disappointed to see that being passed. My department inherited, as Minister, when I came into office in February of last year, lots of challenges, and we're working through them. We have a good story to tell in relation to the Sustainable Agriculture Programme, over £300 million of support we're delivering to farmers in Northern Ireland, the only part of the UK that money's been ring-fenced, and we're delivering that out, and next year is going to be really, really quite key, the farm sustainability payment and lots of other schemes in terms of farm and nature. In terms of TV, we've managed to get an agreement in terms of a blueprint for the way forward. The first time in a long while we've managed to get an agreement on that, and we're pushing ahead in regards to that. I acknowledge the frustrations around some of these issues. These are big, difficult issues we're working through. Ammonia is another one, and I understand the concerns in terms of replacement sheds and where that is. We have to remain on the right side of the law in regards to that, and I'm meeting with the UFU and other stakeholders in the next number of weeks. I don't underestimate the challenges around these issues, but I'm committed to working through them, but doing it in an open and transparent manner.
In relation to TB, we had a meeting with a number of farmers earlier this week, with regards to that, and obviously their concerns are regarding the regionalisation programme and the focus that it currently has, and I suppose an area that has been identified for that work is that of a low risk area as opposed to a medium to high risk where there may be more tangible results, let us say. Can I ask why that particular area was chosen, and if, as a department, that you're working with Professor Dick, who is doing some sterling work with regards to collating accurate numbers of badger movement?
So I'm aware of the work that Professor Dick's done in regards to that, and we're happy to consider science and evidence in regards to all of this. It's important, it's peer reviewed and it's robust, and we will engage with people around that, because that's how we inform our decisions in relation to science and evidence. With regards to the regionalised area, this area, I understand, has around 10% in terms of level of infection. If 10% isn't high enough, folks, I worry, because 10% is unsustainable for the farm community. It's far too high. The area in question has been selected because of the geographical nature of it. It's ideal for us to be able to move in terms of a regionalised approach. There's support from our colleagues in the south in regards to this. Is to be welcomed. It is a three-pronged approach. It is including a wildlife intervention measure. It is including cattle measures. That's something we want to engage with the farming community on. That will include, if they want, in terms of additional biosecurity, and we give advice on that, but also in terms of additional testing in regards to it. So, to me, the regionalised approach has proven to be successful in other parts of Europe, and I'm committed to doing all I can in regards to this issue. In terms of wildlife, before people even come onto it, we have to turn lessons from the judicial review, and that's why we're doing this in a way which is robust, and we will consult about it from the spring of next year.
I'm conscious that I've probably taken too much time, and so I'll follow up with further questions another time.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you. William, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for coming along to the committee today. In relation to blue tongue, one thing that concerns me is the fact that the animals in question didn't show any symptoms. So therefore it's more difficult. It's all very well to say to be vigilant, but if animals don't show symptoms, how do you know they have it? Other than testing. So it's going to take a lot of testing to identify the animals in question that may be infected.
I think that's a double-edged sword in a way. It is good that they didn't show any symptoms. If that's a predictor of what's to come, then blue tongue maybe won't cause as big a problem for the cattle industry here, but that's early days to say that. You know, and in terms of comments made by the chair earlier about vaccination, I think farmers really need to think carefully about and make good, wise decisions together with their private vets. But yes, this herd, they didn't show any symptoms and there was no effect in production. But that's for cattle as well. I mean, sheep show a very different clinical picture. And, you know, we're in constant learning mode here. We're watching what's happening in Great Britain. Their disease has generally been picked up by farms that have reported symptoms. Their surveillance.
And it makes it strange, it just makes it a bit more difficult from veterinary position whenever there's no symptoms.
But that's not to say that next year, and especially in the height of the mid-season, when there's phenomenally much more risk of infection, that there won't be symptoms. So the concern of the agriculture community is well founded, and you know, listening to reports in Great Britain, most of the practitioners are actually recommending people vaccinate for good reason. You know.
Okay. In relation to compensation, I take it that beef farms, I'm not talking about breeding stock, beef farms that have cattle ready for a slaughter can go to slaughter and get full payment for their cattle, so they don't need compensation.
No.
Isn't that right? Breeding stock will be the only issue in relation to compensation, probably.
Compensation only really comes in if we were to take a decision to cull an infected herd, in which case the legislation states that animals that are infected get 50% and other animals get 100%.
But in a herd that has infection, if that farmer had beef cattle, could he not make the decision to go to the factory and get full payment?
Once animals are considered diseased, that
But
stops to become an option.
they're allowed to go to the factory. You're saying they're allowed to go for slaughter.
If they're not positive.
If they're not positive.
So why would the farmer take 50% of the value whenever he's allowed to sell them at full value?
But if an animal is considered under the legislation to be diseased, then they're not by definition fit for human consumption.
Yeah, I thought you told us earlier on they can go for human consumption.
But if an animal is diseased, the public wouldn't want to know that an animal was.
What you're saying now is an animal's blue tongue, it can go for human consumption.
So what happens if testing comes back and the animal is positive, then it doesn't go to slaughter, okay? In the case, for example, in relation to Clandyboy, where there's been 44 that have been identified as positive, that's a very high number. So culling of those animals is not the epidemiological response to that. These animals are of no clinical signs and will get better.
They'll get better.
They'll get better. Yeah. So
which is good, but the situation is, if what you're saying to me is that you're saying to the committee is that animals with blue tongue can still go for human consumption, can't you're saying? Or they can.
So if testing comes back that the animal's positive, then the animal remains on farm.
Can go for human consumption to the factory. If it's a beef animal.
No, if it's being considered a diseased outbreak, in that situation, no, it wouldn't. And it'd be the same as if an animal is found to have symptoms of disease and comes to the attention of an official veterinarian in the factory, then it's not eligible for consumption either.
If it's a beef animal, the department gets full value for it in the factory. So why would you pay 50% value of the animal? The animal, if you cull the animal, that's a beef animal, you get full value for it in the factory, or should do.
Well, it would be an option, but I think in this situation, if it was a cull animal, the department would choose not to put that animal into the human food chain if it's considered to be a diseased animal. But in this situation, there is no evidence of clinical infection, so
that's okay. In relation to TB, and my colleague did say regionalisation. We had farmers and some UFU members with us the other day in the meeting. They have concerns that the area chosen for TBR is one of the lowest instances in Northern Ireland. Why was a higher incidence area not chosen?
So, as I've outlined to Michelle, the area in question has been chosen because of its geographical nature, so it makes it better in terms of
being a test case.
I would get your point if it was 5%. But boy, would I love 5% levels of infection in Northern Ireland. We don't have that. We have unsustainable levels of TB, and I'm trying to use every single method within our toolbox in regards to this. So we have a blueprint. We're working in conjunction with stakeholders. So we're not going to go and say we're going to mandate X, Y, and Z. We're going to consult in terms of things. We're going to try to bring people with us, and we're going to pursue the regionalised approach. We've engaged with the Irish government, recognising this is a good example of cross-border cooperation, because this disease doesn't respect borders. I understand the concerns around this, and I've met farmers. I've had farmers in tears with me, so we understand the impact this is having in terms of farmers' mental health, and I know that you were hearing from them on Tuesday. So that's why it's an important issue for me and also veterinary service. And when we were dealing with this issue, as we have done over the last few days in relation to blue tongue, officials were also engaging around TB. That shows you the level of priority that are given to it.
Yes, and TB is a concern, and I can declare an interest because I have TB in my own herd at home. On the
Sorry
farm.
to hear that.
It's not at high levels by any means, but it's prevalent. So I have some knowledge of the situation. But we're told in a press report a few months ago that there was a badger boom in Northern Ireland in numbers. Has the department sought to identify the numbers of badgers in Northern Ireland?
I'm aware that report came from, and it's in terms of what was referenced by Michelle. We're happy to consider science and evidence as presented to us. There is a need to be able to do a Badger survey, and that's one of the actions within the blueprint.
In relation to planning and SES and the stagnation, the issue of many poultry houses applications been held up. I'm aware that NAA has approved or have come back positive in many of these, and the SAS are the ones that are holding them up. Even though the Department of Agriculture in the Republic of Ireland has accepted and come back positive, they're still been held up. It's a big issue for Moy Park.
I'm happy to take that issue away because it's been raised by a number of other members and come back. I do know that there's a role there in terms of shared environmental services, but that obviously sits within infrastructure
councils.
and councils. So it's obviously for yourselves as a committee in terms of how you interface with those other
Yeah, but I think from my understanding, William, absolutely right. There are cases where NIA has been able to say that with the mitigations being proposed, it is content. Decisions by the councils are entirely those. They are decisions by the councils as planning authority. So NIA or other parts of the department that have a role do not get to say yes or no to a planning application. That's the job of the local planning authority. But where there is, and I've seen it from the NIA, evidence that those bringing forward the applications have the right mitigating measures, then those, you're absolutely right, those applications are not being objected to by NIA.
Yeah, because if some, I'm involved, applicants have contacted my office and myself in relation to some of these applications that are sitting in the system and for months, and SAS seemed answerable to no one on this issue.
They should be answerable to the local council who's using them, because it's council which is the planning authority and is the ultimate decision maker. And they are, as you say, Minister, they are a creature of the councils.
Yeah, so whether you want to engage with NILGA in regards to this, or in terms of local government.
Thank you, William. Okay, Anya.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for coming in to brief us, folks. It's good to see you. And look, I'll try and be concise as possible with these questions. I just want to, I suppose, drill down a wee bit further in relation to blue tongue. So just around testing protocols, first of all, has the department got any data in relation to how many farms and holdings within the temporary control zone that has been tested to date and maybe remains to be tested?
There are about 700 cattle herds and 300 sheep flocks in the control zone, and we haven't actually started to test any yet, but they will be done in the next few days. I believe there will be some done before the weekend is out, and then there'll be further done in the next week or two. It is quite a considerable undertaking, I guess, and a change to operations, but this is a priority, and we'll get this done as quickly as possible.
And just in terms of the tests, David, and I suppose the results that DAERA will compile as a result of that, will some of the results be published by the department, just in terms of positive cases, negative cases, amount of cattle tested, sheep tested, any of that data? In
terms of surveillance, yes, we always we have to give an account in official journal in terms of what the disease investigation has, so it become public, a matter of public record. We've already given outline results for the infected premises.
And look, thank you for that. In terms of the, I suppose, infection transmission, can the infection be passed on in utero?
Yes, it can.
And in terms of mortality around that, I'm assuming young or lambs or calves possibly are more susceptible to the virus.
It depends on what trimester of pregnancy they're infected. If they're infected in the first third of pregnancy, usually it results in an abortion. If it affects in the middle third of pregnancy, then usually there are some congenital defects, and the last third, they're usually born reasonably, immune competent. So it really depends on what trimester. And Schmallenberg has shown us a few lessons in terms of what that is like. In a year that Schmallenberg can affect Northern Ireland, it can cause quite devastating impacts. Blue tongue's a little bit more predictable because it will be year on year.
Thank you, David. Just to move
Can I
on.
just say on you as well, just in terms of testing, we've moved very rapidly in regards to this. And once a picture's emerged, we've went public about it, and that's what we've done. So we did that Saturday evening. I spoke to the press then on Sunday and then yesterday, so we're moving pretty rapidly in this. In addition to that testing that's occurring with regards to on-farm, there's also that surveillance that's occurring in abattoirs. Yeah. That's how we identified this at the beginning, and that is a really, really important measure that we have in place in regards to this. And I would echo the word that David said in terms of AFBI. AFBI have been excellent in terms of turning this around and understanding the urgency with this. So there's, there really is a focus on this, but it's an emerging picture, and the more data we get, the better.
And thank you for that, Minister. And I know others have stated from the get-go with this. I suppose the work that AFBI and the team of vets has been undertaken over the last number of days, no doubt, has been huge. In terms of vaccinations, what assessments have been carried out to date in relation to the efficacy of the vaccinations? I think, David, keep me right, there's 3 licensed in the north. And maybe just talk about the differences in those vaccinations themselves.
There are various different scientific papers on that, but one of those vaccines is generally accepted to be slightly better than the others. Okay. The Scottish Government have come out and said which one they think is more appropriate. I don't know if we made a policy decision ourselves on that, and it'd be commercial data. But yes, I mean, they are considered at the moment licensed. They were licensed at pace. I guess they were licensed under enormously challenging conditions in the Netherlands, where they were actually being used in the face of an outbreak. So at the moment, the view is that while they don't actually prevent animals from getting sick, they limit the signs of the sickness. And I think that's a really important, factor that has to be considered. Yeah. So. I think while the uptake of vaccination in the rest of GB hasn't maybe been as much as it's been anticipated, would encourage the farming community to really engage well on this, because it's a disease we just don't know what the potential impact is, and we have the highest standard of animal health status here in Northern Ireland, and our agri-food sector is very, very important to us, and reputationally, it's renowned worldwide.
I suppose just moving forward into the higher vector period in around spring or summer, would the department consider possibly a mandatory vaccination programme?
That's something we're considering at the moment. We've seen how this has emerged in terms of England and Wales, and we've left that as an option for farmers in conjunction with the PVPs. What I would say is that we're in winter now, it's getting colder. There is a potential that the midge population will overwinter, and that's where this could come back in spring. So that's why, even if we get through the next few weeks and there's no further cases, and we can't be guaranteed of that, just be conscious that this hasn't gone away.
No doubt will continue to evolve. It's very much a moving picture in that sense. Just in relation to the vaccine stock levels here, where are they at the minute? I suppose, have we enough stock to cover the level of vaccinations that farmers may want to partake in over the coming weeks and months?
Well, it will be very much commercial driven. The Minister was very proactive and foresightful in terms of introducing access to those vaccines, which is really important because it's not something you can just switch on overnight. Yeah. So at least there is a process now for getting the vaccines, and farmers can apply for a license to the department to get approval to obtain a stock of vaccine. We're trying to limit the amount of vaccine that any one farmer can actually achieve, get, so that it's fair for all. There's going to be, we don't want to run on vaccine, and other people not get what they need. But our understanding would there would be stocks available.
That's reassuring. And just one final question, Chair, in relation to blue tongue, and I know it was touched on earlier on, just for the avoidance of doubt, can the department categorically state or rule out the possibility that blue tongue was introduced here via importation of livestock?
Well, every evidence from our first infected premises is that was not a factor in this place at all. There was co-located associated sheep flock. Okay, it was kept a little bit further away, but they've all tested absolutely negative. So yes, there have been speculation and rumours that people have been bringing in animals illegally. That's very disappointing, and I'm sure it's confined to a very, very small minority of people. And I think clear messaging is and has been from the very start from the Minister that responsible sourcing of livestock is very important. That's even legal responsible livestock sourcing. And we would like to carry that on in the future, you know, that this part of the world does not have the diseases that are in other parts of Europe and wider field. So, you know, to carry that through would be very good.
Yeah. I think it's important I echo that. I'm very proud to do this job, and one of the reasons why is that I meet so many farmers and they take such pride in terms of their husbandry and animal health and welfare. And, you know, the idea that people wouldn't be, you know, sticking by the rules is really an anathema to the overwhelming majority of farmers in Northern Ireland. And we've set out the situation. I think we've been proactive in terms of our communications around this. What we know, we're happy to come to the committee again if you want. There has been some stuff on social media, conspiracy theories and all the rest, and those people just need to catch themselves on, because that's actually doing a real injustice to farming in Northern Ireland with some of the stuff I'm seeing posted on social media. We need to respect the fact that our farmers are people I'm immensely proud of in terms of what they're doing for Northern Ireland and how they're working with us in response to this.
I suppose from the department's point of view, there has been information put out over the last number of days, even going back to last weekend. I don't know if it would be much use, because, Minister, I have seen some of the rumours and conspiracy theories floating about in social media. If the department was to compile a quick Q&A document, just with even maybe frequently asked questions, to disseminate amongst the farming community, even through the UFU and those channels, I think that would be greatly beneficial. Just one final question, Chair, and I'm going to switch themes totally here and bring us back to the rural policy framework redesign. So I think, Minister, it's due to go out for consultation in the spring.
Yes, it is.
When would you intend to bring forward the final policy itself?
So, working in my mind, it's probably autumn of next year. There's been great work done by officials, but also working in conjunction with stakeholders around this. It's probably a model example of policy development. Do you want to say any more on this, Katrina?
I mean, I'm really proud of the team actually and the way they have gone about their engagement. But hopefully, consultation in the spring, that gives us an opportunity then late spring, summer, to sort of assess what we've got and bring final proposals to the Minister in the autumn. Minister will definitely want this done by the end of the next calendar year, I suspect. So we will have to keep up the pace. But the engagement has been terrific. You know, this was an area that I worried a bit about at the start, whether there would be so many expectations that it might be difficult to land
on something.
And the pillars have been really well supported, and the approach and that sort of concept of, you know, as being a champion, a voice for rural communities, I think has really crystallised a lot of support around it.
Well, definitely, I've heard feedback from some groups involved in the process, and it's been very positive. I would say from a local level, at a grassroots level, there's a lot of community groups, rural community groups, kind of biting up the bit to get something delivered, to see something delivered, and more importantly, to get financial support down into those grassroots groups. So, look, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. Conscious of time, so I keep.
No, you're okay. You can make sure everyone's fairly treated.
Right. Okay. Then. What are the barriers to the recruitment and retention of veterinary staff? We've heard about the veterinary staff, the number of vacancies that there are. Within that, have you identified what the actual barriers are to the recruitment and retention?
A number of barriers, Tom. One of them is the fact that we are in a highly competitive market. So right across Europe, there is a demand for veterinary professionals that continues to outstrip supply. And that's not just across the civil service or the public sector. That's across every sector. So we are competing in a pool that is not big enough to meet everybody's needs. So we have shortages. Then we have the reality that there are employers that can offer, in some cases, better terms and conditions that we have. And those are probably, David, the key things, the overall shortage and the terms and conditions. I don't know whether you would add anything more to that list.
Yeah, I think we need to test the market again to see what the current situation is. I think it's been some time since we had a recruitment for our entry-level veterinary officers, and there were reasons for that. We were very lucky this year to recruit two specialist veterinary epidemiologists, so we're reasonably confident there are people who are out there, and both these people are coming from outside Northern Ireland, one from South Africa, one from Spain, really very highly skilled people who will help us. And we're also taking in quite a lot of people on agency contracts as an interim measure. But of course, that's not what we want to do. No. You know, we're very committed to having a holistic service because we believe that that's the way that Northern Ireland agriculture requires our service to be multi-skilled people who understand every aspect and every part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Back then to the TB, a very prevalent issue at this moment in time. Farmers are at the end of their tether. We're hearing from them about the continual increase in TB. In fact, they're making the assumption that in the next number of years, the cost to the department is going to be an extra 10 million every year. We've heard about partnership groups that are set up to look at this, and different reports that has been done and so forth, but it hasn't really made any difference because the TB is still increasing. Now, we all know, I think if we're all honest about the thing, we all know that until there's a cull within the badger population, then we're going to see no change within the TB situation. So, with regards to the proposals that you are bringing forward, when can farmers realistically expect to see a turnaround or a stoppage, if you like, in the increase and the TB starting to decrease within Northern Ireland? Because this is where we've got to get to. But all the groups that are set up on the reports is doing nothing to reduce it. It's doing nothing to stop it, and we're talking about seeking to eradicate it. We're talking about getting it down to 5% or so, or below it if we could. So, with the interventions that you're seeking to bring forward, when can we begin to see a turnaround within the TB crisis?
You might find this strange in my response, but there's a lot of common positions between you and I in this, okay? Not sustainable for the farming community. It's causing untold mental distress and financial hardship. It's not sustainable for us. We can't just keep going up and up and up and up because our budget in terms of Northern Ireland Block Grant is not doing that. So we have to get this down. We owe it to everyone to do that. You outlined in relation to wildlife intervention. My predecessor announced that in terms of a non-selective cull. That was judicially reviewed, and that judicial review was successful. So we'll have to take lessons from that in terms of wildlife intervention. So I understand the frustration in terms of the pace of which we're going out to consult in terms of wildlife intervention options. But the reason we're doing that is we're trying to do it right. I was taught something very early in my life: either do something right or don't do it at all. And it's about making sure that we do this correctly. So we go out to consult on those wildlife intervention options. We allow people to come back in response to that. We consider those responses. And can I reassure the committee that I will respect the science and evidence? If it delivers inconvenient truths, we need to respect them and act upon it. That's where I sit. If to me, we have to understand that the science and evidence around this is varied, and that's why we need to interrogate it. I understand there's different sources coming through on this, and we consider the way forward. But alongside wildlife intervention, and I am very clear that there has to be a wildlife intervention and it plays a role in relation to TB, there's also issues in terms of how do we support people, in terms of that people pillar, their culture and training, and actually the real impact that this has in terms of fatalism, that the levels of infection it has, but also in terms of cattle. So a much more focus in terms of risk-based approach in terms of movements, biosecurity on the farm, double fencing. We need to use every tool we've got to reduce this. The ultimate aim has to be eradication. We have an obligation to do that under law. But I want to reassure people in relation to this issue. I know it's an important issue, not just for this committee, but for your constituents and for the farming community. And I'll do what I can in regards to it. I have met farmers when I'm out and about, and some of them come over to me and they say, I'm 70, I'm 80, and this has been something that's been going for decades. So I'm conscious that this is a concern. But the difference now is that the levels are totally and utterly unsustainable. What we're at now is at historic levels, and they have to be brought down. We have no other option. And if that means taking difficult decisions, I'll do it.
Okay, but when can we expect to see this reduction beginning?
So in terms of the interventions with regards to cattle, so in terms of risk-based trading and also in terms of biosecurity on the farm, those options are available now. And we will support the farming community if they wish to proceed with them. It's up to them. We're ready to go. In relation to wildlife interventions, we consult on that in spring of next year. We consider the responses, and then there will be legislation, and that will unfortunately be in the next mandate because we lost 2 years of this mandate. The other issues in relation to regionalised approach, we're ready to go in relation to that. So we're moving on this. We've put resources to this. I've put additional resources in terms of blood testing as well.
Okay. We'll leave that at that. Another issue that's, I suppose, something that you're very passionate about, we know, is climate change. So if we look at climate change and the targets are set for it, and obviously if we're all realistic about it in this room today, the targets are set, we're not going to meet those targets by 2030 or 2050 or whatever. Those targets just aren't going to be met. That's the looking at it from a realistic point of view. So, and that's having then the added knock-on effect on infrastructure projects and all of this. So would there not be some merit in going back and revisiting this, looking at the targets and seeking to reduce them slightly even, so that then that will allow all these other it'll not have the same knock-on effect on the infrastructure projects and all that's taking place, and maybe there will be a possibility of meeting those targets then if they're slightly lower than what they are at the minute. Is there not merit, do you think, in looking at this again and coming back with something that can be met, that can be achieved?
I think you know what my answer is going to be in regards to this, and I am passionate about climate action, and the reason is because it's having a real impact for Northern Ireland and beyond, but also over 70% of people in a recent poll said they want to see politicians taking more action in regards to climate change. Climate change is reality here. The issues we're talking are in regards to blue tongue, Asian hornet, those diseases that are now coming to our shores, are as a result partly in terms of climate change. The legislation sets out the pathway ahead and our legal obligations, and I'm committed to meeting them. But I do this not just because of our legal obligations, but also because of the opportunities. I want to create these good green jobs in Northern Ireland. We shouldn't be left behind in terms of other countries who are following the road towards decarbonisation. I just think it's wrong that we should expose our businesses and, most importantly, households, particularly people who are the less well off, in terms of the risks, in terms of energy shocks, prices going up at the behest of dictators who own fossil fuels, but also in relation to the fact that the opportunities for investing in renewables will bring down bills. So that's why I'm doing this. I understand there's a difference of opinion in this, and I would just say in closing, I believe in my heart and soul in a just transition. The Assembly agreed, and everyone voted for it, for a Just Transition Commission in Northern Ireland to hold me and my department and all other departments to account to make sure that this is a fair and just way forward. And I will continue to engage with my partners in government in the executive so we can get that set up. It's a legal obligation to have a Just Transition Commission, and that's really, really important that's in place, because hopefully that would reassure you in terms of some of the questions you've got. And I've been very clear that agriculture must be represented on that Just Transition Commission. But what more? Not just one person, but two. You need to have two representatives from agriculture on that commission.
Okay, and again, as a department, I'm sure when it comes to climate change, you'd like to be leading the way within your department on this. And yet, I did see a report there recently where so many vehicles are used within your department, and maybe there are only 6 of them that are electric vehicles. So therefore, whenever it comes to this whole issue, how then is the department setting an example and leading the way in this if this is the situation? And that's only a report I read. How accurate that is, I don't know, but I read it in the press.
Well, Katrina will answer that. And
it is an absolutely fair point in the sense of we need to lead by example. So we have actually agreed a new fleet policy. Our approach is that wherever it is viable and sensible, we will opt for electric and hybrid vehicles. But if you flip it the other way, Tom, imagine the outrage if we had decided we were going to get rid of perfectly serviceable vehicles.
You'd criticise me?
We would be criticised.
And rightly so, Thomas, and rightly so.
and actually, it would do the planet no good at all. So we have to get the best use out of the machinery and the vehicles that we have. We can't just suddenly dump them and say, no, we want to be so green, because that wouldn't be being green at all. But we do have, I think we're possibly the first department to have a new fleet policy agreed, and we are very clear in our way forward. But sadly, we can't just get rid of the past.
Okay, there's only 3 in there,
Don't worry, we're putting the wheels in motion.
Literally.
Aoife.
Oh, thanks. I'll not keep you long. I think all the questions have been asked at this stage. And look at I'm not all the Blue Tongue questions have been covered that I had, but I do want to just reiterate the message of my colleagues here to commend the quick action of you and the department and all the staff involved in relation to the Blue Tongue. That can't be understated. So, just in terms of given the majority of farms here in the north are small or smaller scale operations, can you outline what specific benefits such farmers would gain from participating in the Genotype scheme?
There's very clear benefits for this. This is a game changer, frankly, in allowing us to get a greater picture in terms of our national herd. The department's putting significant funding to that. And we're looking to ensure that we can essentially transform how we approach these issues. We've talked an awful lot about TB, and I acknowledge the concern around that, and this will allow us to make a lot more knowledgeable decisions in terms of breeding, but also in terms of wider issues beyond just TB. So we're investing in it, we're leading on it, and I'm glad to get support from other parties on it.
And what percentage of farmers in the south have enrolled into the scheme to date?
I wouldn't have those exact percentages in terms of the size,
if that's helpful.
but we can write back on that.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. And feedback from the farmers that we're getting within, certainly I am getting in the constituency. Do you see the question that is continually asked, do you see an introduction in a sheep scheme? Because obviously the farm sustainability payment has been cut to pay for other schemes like beef schemes, but no sheep scheme has been introduced.
Okay, so we left the EU, we can debate that another day, we ran out of time. So we had to set up a new sustainable agriculture programme, and the key interventions around that in terms of support for the farm sustainability payment and farm sustainability standards is absolutely critical in terms of that pathway ahead. So now we've got that agreed, that's coming in from the 1st of January of next year. I've always been clear that 2 things. That this is, in terms of the farm sustainability payment, and I would echo the words of my predecessor, this is designed to be a safety net to support farmers, and that we're going to have a range of interventions to support the farming community over the time ahead. So Farming with Nature forms part of that. With the farm sustainability payment and farm sustainability standards in place, we can move resources towards rolling out Farming with Nature. We need to do that because it's really, really important we support farmers in the work that they can do. But also in regards to sheep support, I have said before, and I'm honouring my word, that now we're able to get the farm sustainability payment in place, we can move resources towards looking towards scoping out a sheep support scheme. I think that was an inequity in terms of that not being there previously. I want to put it in place. I think of real benefits in terms of doing it with regards to animal health and welfare. This would not be a scheme based upon headage. It would probably be based upon a farm-based orientation around that. But the work that towards delivering sheep support now starts, and we will be engaging with stakeholders around it.
Okay, thank you. And just in relation to TB, which has been widely discussed today, you've made the statement here today that levels are unsustainable. The farmers, both in our constituencies, every week, and in this committee, have said that the levels are unsustainable. And as you know, on the island of Ireland, it's one disease control area. And as you have said, the bovine TB does not recognise borders. But you've recently secured shared island funding in relation to TB, which is very welcome. However, we still don't have an integrated all-island strategy for eradication. And in the south, a targeted wildlife intervention, including controlled culling of badgers in the most affected areas, is in place. But here in the north, the absence of similar approach has been repeatedly raised by farmers who are operating under enormous pressure. But do you agree, alongside the shared island investment, the next logic step must be a coordinated all-island strategy, including humane wildlife interventions, where evidence show it is, when evidence shows it's effective, to finally bring down TB rates, to give farming families the certainty that they need?
There's different legislative setup in the south with regards to wildlife interventions. We need to be very conscious of that. We are doing that cooperation. This regionalised approach is a demonstration of that. We will work through that, and if there's further areas of cooperation, we'll do it, because I think it makes a lot of sense around that. Our focus at the moment is to consult in terms of those wildlife intervention options. I have to take learnings from the judicial review. I think we all need to take learnings from the judicial review in terms of the process that has to be followed in this. So that's why I'm not going to be drawn in terms of any specific wildlife intervention options, because we also need to respect the science and evidence. We need to look in terms of the UK and Ireland, in terms of how the developments have been around this, take learnings from that, and then go forward. I recognise the importance of this. I do understand, and I'll say it again, the wildlife intervention is a key part of this. But also there's measures we can take in relation to cattle. And if people want to see this being driven down, then come to me. Say, give us the support, work with the farming community in terms of those measures, support farmers in terms of biosecurity on the farm, in terms of risk-based trading, in terms of, double fence. And there's just stuff that we can put in place. We're prepared to work with people on it. As ever, we want to work in conjunction with the farming community in regards to this. And any support that can be given, and particularly in relation to the regionalised approach, would be appreciated. Because leadership is about taking the difficult decisions, and I'm prepared to do that. But also I need people's support so we can actually deliver for the farming community on what's a critical issue.
Okay, and I, when I agree with the vast majority of that, and with respect, Minister, I've heard time and again about the JR in terms of wildlife intervention. My understanding from the reading of it, the JR was based around the consultation and not specifically around the wildlife intervention. But I hear time and again that the JR is brought up.
So I read through the JR, and probably you have as well. But as you know, it did consider one element of this and didn't go into the rest of it.
The rest, yeah. And I think our understanding of the steps that you would need to take to reach a sound position has evolved, informed by the judgment. But you're absolutely right. The judgment itself did not deal with all of the issues that we now know we would have to deal with. So it is a case. I don't think it would be in anybody's interest for a false step here that would get unpicked again. I think that would be absolutely, the last thing anybody would want. So we do have to step through with care, and that's very much what's happening now, with the consultation coming out in the spring.
Thank you. That's fine.
As you've been very generous with your time, I'm just going to finish with two. Because I didn't get enough out of you there. First one is just because thanks to Anya. I always have to check her names because I get Aoife and Anya mixed up. Anya, in regard to additional support, so we had a lot of interaction with the mushroom sector previously in regard to legislative change. We're now moving into kind of like the storm season, and in terms of additional support, is there any additional support? Are we looking at any additional support for non-land based activity whether it's in that horticulture or arable space or whatever that is.
Yeah. So I outlined this in the Assembly at question time on Tuesday in terms of the range of interventions we're taking, particularly in regards to horticulture. We just have to understand as well that leaving the EU has not been easy. I'll say no more. But putting together sustainable agricultural programmes is quite a lot of work. So there's a range of measures that we're continuing to roll out, and over time ahead, then we'll be able to see the benefits of that. Another thing that came up in the question time on Tuesday is Sustainable Farm Investment Programme, which we were rolling out, which will be very, very important in terms of supporting in relation to capital purchases. And that is, in many instances, an example of a just transition in terms of how we support people in using technology. You mentioned the mushroom sector. I'm very concerned in terms of the situation in the mushroom sector as a result of UK migration policy. We have a stark difference between north and south in regards to that, and the mushroom industry is feeling the consequences of that. I've sent many letters to the UK government in regards to this issue, but their lack of flexibility in recognising our unique situation in Northern Ireland is a concern for me, not just in relation to mushrooms, but also in terms of fishers and the agri-food sector more broadly. Labour challenges are quite severe now.
My final one, Minister, then, is in regard to, I'm not sure if you're aware, I'm sure you'll have heard of Natural England, but in terms of their approach, in terms of their key guiding principles for ammonia reduction, they have a really good key guiding principle, which is mitigation and betterment, which is when you're looking at a planning application, the whole farm is looked at rather than just the planning application. Are you minded or are you engaged with NIEA in regard to this aspect? Because it's one of the blockages to DAERA saying unblocking the planning pipeline, but also seeing a wider betterment.
I seek more information in regards to what they've published, and that's underway at the moment. Anyone who wants to talk to me about ammonia, come to me after you've read the Office Environmental Protection Report in regards to it.
Now, to be fair, Natural England also sit under the auspices of OEP, so I'm reasonably confident that they will have read the OEP's reports as well, Minister.
The OEP report is in relation to ammonia in Northern Ireland, and the Department is previously
and their UK-wide targets as well, Minister.
Yeah.
We're still part of the UK.
They are, yes, and understand that. Ammonia levels in Northern Ireland are at a different scale. What we're doing is we're working through what they've published. I'm committed to finding a way forward which reduces ammonia emissions. We've got to do that, but also in terms of dealing with practical issues in terms of replacement sheds. And I'm engaging with stakeholders, which is the Ulster Farmers Union and Northern Ireland Environment Link in the next few weeks. I
think just about all of us, we understand that. I think we share that ambition, but we also want to see the ability for betterment on our farms, and that will mean unblocking the planning blockage, if that's okay.
Chair, I just say I understand the importance of this to the farming community, because particularly within pigs and poultry, in terms of animal welfare commitments, in terms of the better chicken commitment and farrowing, I understand the challenges that are emerging.
Thank you. Michelle, this is really small, genuinely really small.
It's really
okay.
small because
really
I've raised this with the Minister from the first day he came into office, and that's in relation to support for those sectors who are vulnerable to weather. Obviously, potato farmers was our first engagement. Mushroom growers and so on are similar, can fall into all sorts of different categories as well. But it's just in relation to the crisis framework, which has been maybe give me some progress on that.
So your AQ just came in on that, and I think I want to engage with officials to see whereabouts that is. We were quite lucky in terms of the last winter, but the one before we weren't, and particularly in relation to the potato sector. Mm-hmm. So we just need to step through what exactly the arrangements are if we have a difficult winter, and then we want to support people around that. So I want to check in with senior officials in regards to this. We understand your concern in regards
because in the past, obviously, we've had to have interventions with regards to fishermen too, so I'm just alert to that.
No, and I think it's a legitimate point to make.
Minister, thank you so much for your time. You'll recognise we've only about 15, 16 months left in this mandate. There's a lot on our plate, so I'm going to invite you back as early as possible in the new year. If we can liaise through the various offices that we bring you back as early as possible in the new year. I want to thank you on behalf of the committee for your time and your openness to take questions today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Members, thank you for your questions. With your permission, we're actually going to move on to agenda item 7 as opposed to going back to matters arising. We'll deal with that later on, but I do need your permission to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, members. We'll give the witnesses a second or two to orientate themselves. Thank you for that. That was a good session. Monitoring Committee.
I know.
Are you looking for the Health Committee after this one, Nigel? It seems so. I was reading through my papers and I went, must be a different one. A different item. Yes. That's right. Okay, members. Okay, agenda item 7 is the Departmental Oral Evidence Session on the Environmental Principles Policy Statement, otherwise known as EPPS. Members, I refer you to the pack starting at page 41, to the briefing paper from the Environment Resources Policy Division on the NI EPPS, which was led on the 20th of November, thereby commencing the scrutiny period of 21 sitting days. That's slightly unusual, but it's good. As I mentioned last week, this is an unusual scrutiny period, but laid down as Schedule 2 of the Environment Act 2021, which is in your pack. The Environment Act 2021 imposes a statutory duty on DAERA to publish an EPPS, and also a statutory duty on all departments and the UK government ministers when making policy for Northern Ireland to have due regard to the said EPPS. I also refer you to the pack, starting at page 46, which is in draft. Details of the process for considering the EPPS Schedule 2, improving the natural environment, Northern Ireland, of the Environment Act 2021, starts at page 82. So members, I now welcome the following officials to brief the committee and take any questions. We have Mr. Shane Doris, Director of Environmental Resource Policy, Mr. Nigel Chambers, Assistant Director of Environmental Resources Policy Division, and Mr. Chris Conway, Head of Environmental Principles OEP Liaison Branch. Thank you very much, gentlemen. The floor is yours.
Thanks. Good morning, Chair, Deputy Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the Environment Principles Policy Statement, also known as the EPS. The Environment Act 2021 imposes a statutory duty on DAERA to publish an EPS, but also places a statutory duty on all Northern Ireland departments and on UK government ministers when making policy for Northern Ireland to have due regard to the EPS. The observance of 5 principles has been a central tenet of EU policy and legislation for many decades. When the UK left the EU, an environmental governance gap in respect of environmental principles was created. The principles themselves, therefore, are not new. However, how they are to be applied is different. Under EU membership, the principles were baked into the policy and legislation process, and they were applied systemically. Under the EPS regime, policymakers will have to consider the principles in a more overt manner, and in a similar way to consideration of other impacts such as equality. In February 2022, the Executive and the Assembly agreed the legislative consent motion and approved the commencement of the Northern Ireland provisions of the Act. Under Schedule 2 of the Act, DAERA must publish an NI-EPS following scrutiny by the Northern Ireland Assembly. In relation to the content of the EPS, the statement embeds 5 internationally recognised environmental principles into domestic policy making. The first of these is the integration principle. This principle can be defined as ensuring environmental protection requirements are integrated into departments' policies and activities with a view to promoting sustainable development. The prevention principle concentrates on anticipating and preventing any potential environmental harm rather than reacting to any damage caused by unregulated action. The precaution principle is designed to assist with decision making where there is scientific uncertainty and is a core principle of environmental law. A precautionary approach captures the idea that regulatory intervention or the modification of a policy may be necessary if there is a potential to cause harm to the environment, even if the supporting evidence is incomplete or speculative and the economic costs of regulation are high. The rectification at source principle. Environmental damage should be rectified by targeting its original cause and taking preventive action at source. This principle works closely with the prevention principle to ensure damage to the environment is tackled when and where it occurs, so that it does not have a long-term environmental impact on the local community and biodiversity, spread further afield or have a delayed effect. And finally, the polluter pays principle. This principle essentially means that the cost of preventing, controlling or remediating pollution or other environmental damage should be borne by those who cause it rather than those suffering from the effects of environmental damage or the community at large. A good example of this are the producer responsibility schemes. Policymakers must demonstrate due regard to this policy statement when developing, revising or repealing policy. Due regard means policymakers must actively and seriously consider environmental principles when developing policy, not just acknowledge them. The legal duty is robust and supported by case law requiring evidence-based, timely and rigorous application across all policy areas, not just environmental ones. The statement allows for proportionate application based on the potential environmental effect of the policy. Policymakers are expected to apply the principles from the outset of policy development and maintain records demonstrating how the principles were considered and applied. In order to develop the EPS, DAERA engaged with the Office for Environmental Protection, the OEP, in June 2023. The OEP helpfully provided detailed advice along with comments and advice on the draft policy statement more generally. In September 2024, the draft EPS was issued for public consultation for a 10-week period. A total of 28 responses were received, and although there may not have been a large number of responses, many were very detailed and well informed. A cross-departmental working group, CDWG, was given the opportunity to review and comment on the latest draft of the NI-EPS. Following consideration of minor comments received, appropriate revisions were made. The CDWG subsequently confirmed that it was content with the final version of the NI-EPS. Throughout this process, DAERA officials also engaged closely with DEFRA counterparts. The Act also places a statutory duty on DAERA to consult DEFRA Secretary of State on the NI-EPS. DEFRA Secretary of State sent a letter to the Minister on the 4th of July commending the progress of the NI-EPS and confirmed DEFRA had no further comments. In regards to the position in GB and Ireland, DEFRA has fulfilled its statutory duty for England and its policy statement came into effect in November 2023. Scotland has adopted a distinct approach through its own legislation and published Scotland's Guiding Principles on the Environment, statutory guidance, in August 2023, linking principles to strategic environmental assessments and the planning regime. In Wales, the Environmental Bill was introduced by the Deputy First Minister and the Cabinet Chair for Climate Change and Rural Affairs on the 2nd of June 2025. The bill establishes certain environmental principles and an environmental objective. It will require Welsh ministers and Natural Resources Wales, when making policy, and certain other public authorities when carrying out environmental assessment under the Environmental Assessment of Plans and Programme, to apply the principles and to integrate environmental protection. The Republic of Ireland, as a member of the EU, continues to apply the principles under EU legislation, as NI did before Brexit. In regards to the implementation and the guidance, there is no statutory deadline for publication. However, delay in issuing the EPS may attract criticism for stakeholders and prolong a governance gap created by the UK's departure from the EU. This is an outstanding legislative obligation which risks legal challenge if our duty to lay the NI-EPS is not fulfilled. Once the EPS has been approved, staff will require support to understand how to implement their new duty under the policy. To assist with this, my team are currently working to develop a toolkit to guide policymakers moving forward. And in closing, I would emphasise that the EPS represents a significant step in embedding environmental considerations into policymaking across Northern Ireland. Its implementation will help ensure that environmental protection is not an afterthought, but a core part of decision making. We look forward to working with colleagues across departments to support this transition and to finalise the accompanying toolkit that will help operationalise the statement in practice. We are now happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Excellent, thank you. The report repeatedly refers to decisions made by policymakers in terms of their developing their policy and so on. Who are identified as the policymakers? Who are going to see the biggest differences, if there are any differences, in the application of what we're talking about today?
It applies to all Northern Ireland departments, so it will be anyone involved in the policy development process at all levels. So our guidance that will follow this will be rolled out to all staff across the NICS that are working in policy development to ensure they're cited on the principles and provided with guidance of how to apply them and how to document that.
Has there been an assessment of the guidance as it would have been before Brexit to now, and what are the key differences that people are going to see and feel?
There's no differences in the principles themselves. It's just that they're being applied in a more overt manner. So there's a requirement to document them more clearly, whereas before it would assume they would have been considered. So it's just to make sure that we close that governance gap by making sure that it's documented, whatever the outcome should be.
Okay. We just had the Minister in before there, and a lot of this and some of the fear around this when we make any changes is that in and around planning, for instance, which is probably principally where this is going to, where the rubber will hit the road. Is this in any way going to be a further blockage to planning? Will anybody notice a difference when this is implemented? Or as you've intimated that the principles already exist, so therefore it's just codifying it a bit better?
Yeah, it's about giving it due regard. It doesn't prescribe any particular outcome. So it therefore doesn't tie the hands of ministers to balance those decisions to develop or to balance social outcomes, economic outcomes alongside environmental outcomes. So anywhere where there's a trade-off, as long as that's documented and the logic behind that is set out, that's that is showing due regard for the principles themselves. It doesn't mandate a particular outcome.
That's really good you've come to that point, because I wanted to get to due regard. And I know that there's a bit of a definition, but the definition, who wields the power to determine whether due regard has been met or not?
Well, it's open to scrutiny by the public, by the Assembly, by the OEP, as well, so that they can look at the policy development process and make a determination if they see fit to look at it. That won't always be the case. It may be areas where they would want to give particular focus to, and they will look at that just to ensure that process has been followed.
I suppose just to add as well, it can be brought through litigation, and that will be comparable to what you would see within the equality duties as well. It's a comparable duty in terms of due regard, in terms of decision making.
Interestingly, you'd said in terms of OEP having a say in that. OEP presented before, and their only remit is environment. So singularly, they don't do the balance, as they pointed out. They don't have to do the balance between economy, people. They're just interested in. So, do they have a disproportionate weight in any litigation, or are they just an equal stakeholder in this?
It will be just referring back to the principles in terms of how due regard is applied. So they won't be seeking to see what the outcome is, and that the outcome is weighted towards the environment. It's just that it's given consideration in the process, and that's not to be prescriptive in terms of, and to make sure that there's blockages. It's the other way. It should be looked at it as an opportunity to bring benefits across all those areas, just to make sure it's put on an equal footing in the consideration at the outset. Instead, it doesn't necessarily have to land on the side of the environment, but it's just to make sure that it's properly considered.
Okay, and you can get this in my final one. You can kick this out if it isn't, if I haven't gauged this right. But this seems to me that there would be concentric circles here, that they're overlapping. So I asked the Minister, was he aware of one of the key guiding principles for natural England, for instance, in around mitigations and betterment, and particularly in around the betterment. So in terms of a planning application, for instance, we're finding that there's a paralysis because the planning application is determined on that one new building, shall we say. But in natural England, they have a policy which says if you can better the whole, if you can bring a betterment to the whole, offering the whole farm, for instance, that's where this might be. Would this, in principle, overlap with that or impact on that? And would that be something that could be picked up? It seems to me that it might be an avenue for that.
It would certainly. It would certainly be viewed alongside that, and it would contribute to that process. So it would be, again, looking at the thing in the round, everything in the round. That is the key part of this. So looking at the principles themselves together, or those that apply together, and then looking at the other factors as well. So the decision ultimately should be for that overall outcome that brings benefits to all elements of it.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for that. It was a bit rapid fire for you, but thank you for taking them. Aoife?
Thank you for your presentation. What powers are there to implement this? Is it underpinned with legislation to implement it? Yeah. Yeah,
it's set out within the Environment Act. So that's a statutory duty within the Act that the policymakers give due regard to that. So it would follow from the Environment Act.
Okay, because we're dealing obviously with very live examples, Lough being one of the most obvious, where pollution has severe ecological and social impacts. How will the polluter pays principle, as set out in this statement, actually influence future departmental decisions, so we don't repeat decades of under-regulation and public cost?
Ultimately, it will be for each department and each policy area to interpret the principles and set that out to what level they give regard to the environmental factors. So as long as that is considered and set out, so they in terms of your example, anything going forward couldn't blatantly disregard anything where there is a potential impact to the environment. If any policy has a potential impact on the environment, it has to be considered. The principles have to be considered alongside that. So they can't be ignored at the outset. They should be baked into the policy development right from the original kick-off.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions at this stage? We have we've a bit of time, slightly more time on this one. We have that oddity of the 21 sitting days, which gives us into springtime or something, which is useful. But am I right in saying that the committee, we have the ability to inform the final wording of the principles then, obviously, because we could potentially offer amendment on that as we go through and scrutinise it a bit more. Members, I'm not going to put you necessarily on the spot this morning, except to say that in that regard it would be useful if we get our minds into that space, that it's looking at the principles and looking at the other issues that are faced by the rural farming and agri community. It might be an opportunity to affect that in a positive way. And we'd just like to extend the option of a revisit in early in the new year as we look at that, if that's appropriate. Remember, does anybody have any proposals or any final thoughts on this? No? Okay. I'm just going to suggest that we seek a briefing from the Assembly Research on the design and implementation of the principles in other UK jurisdictions, because they did something different in Scotland, I noticed. I know in the Republic they're still under the EU jurisdiction, so we'd like to maybe tease that out a wee bit further. Members,
just want to maybe in a follow-up in terms of the issue due regard to look at how the ruling on the Brown principles impact on the due regard. Because I picked up from your comments there that departments would interpret their due regard, but obviously there's the ruling on the Brown principles as to how due regard is actually implemented, so that could be picked up in a follow-up.
Yeah, we could definitely do it.
Sorry, apologies. It would be the due regard would follow that definition. So if I may have misspoke in terms of how that would apply, so they would have to give due regard certainly, and that, as you said, that's set out. It would be they would still have the autonomy to make the ultimate decision as long as they follow that due regard process.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. Okay, that's us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. You want to do it?
Yes, it's 5. We've done the minutes.
Okay. It's 5. Members, then we will now move back with your permission to agenda item 5, I believe. Yeah, no, I appreciate you facilitating that to get the minister in. Okay, agenda item 5 then is matters arising, members. I refer you to those starting on page 28 of the pack, and that first piece is correspondence from the department, which is dated the 28th of November, providing an update on DAERA planning performance. Members will recall that on the 6th of November we considered a written update on the department's planning performance, and we sought further information. In response to our request for a breakdown of the current backlog of 353 consultations and timeframes for dealing with the backlog, the department has provided a table of the number of consultations in the backlog by sector as required. The majority of the backlog is within the Natural Environment Division. The Department also reiterates that due to historical and ongoing staff resource pressures in planning teams and the complex case-by-case nature of the planning consultations, it is not possible to give an accurate time frame for clearing the backlog. The committee had noted the average response time had improved from 29 to 25 days and also requested clarification of the full range of response times, specifically the shortest and longest durations recorded. The Department has provided a table of responses times for our consideration, which range from 1 to 161 days. As I have found, members, just in terms of some constituent correspondence, there are grants that are available for some planning applications as well, and they're now falling foul of the lack of response at times and becoming in danger of being viable. That's one of the reasons why it's really important. So in response to our request for the specific factors contributing to ongoing delays in specific scenarios, the Department states that each planning consultation presents its own unique complications. As part of the consultation process, the NED is required to ensure environmental assessments. For example, BAT surveys are completed and included in a submission, and that was one where William was rightly vexed at times. If assessments are found to be missing, this would in turn generate a reconsultation and subsequent delays in application further. The Department states that the number of reconsultations sits at 30 to 40% of caseload and has a significant impact on the cumulative number of consultations. So in response to information regarding managing staffing resources to meet demand for application processing, recruitment competitions for scientific officers and higher scientific officers are progressing, and it is anticipated that most vacant scientific posts will be filled in the first quarter of 26-27. The Department also states that a planning improvement plan has been developed with NED and staff have redeployed where possible. However, redeployment is limited due to resource pressures for other key priorities such as Loch Day and the Environmental Improvement Programme. Members, have you any questions? Michelle, I think you wanted to come in on this?
Yeah, just quickly, just with regard to Table 1, we have the number of consultations which are in the backlog by sector. Is it possible to get an update from them as to what the longest is for each of those, the longest waiting time? Because I know we move on to Table 2 and it gives the full range of response times, and obviously I'm guessing that those have been completed, but there are obviously quite a number there have probably been in the system for a considerable length of time, particularly I'm thinking around sort of the energy side and also the agricultural sheds and stores, but it would just be interesting just to see what the current number of days and backlog they are.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I see that. I see an opportunity, I'm going to be honest, for the Minister in regard to what I was levelling at him towards the end, Michelle, remembers in regard to the betterment proposal from Natural England in terms of looking at the overall site, if you like, rather than just a single plan application. But yes, no, I agree with that. Are you content with that, Clark? Yep. Okay, thank you for that. Members, anything else in regard to that one? And that's, I know it's of significant interest to many members here. Okay, then item number 2, referred to start on page 36 of the pack, correspondence from the Department providing an update on the Lough Neagh Action Plan. The committee considered a written briefing on the Lough Neagh report and action plan on the 6th of November and subsequently requested an oral briefing from officials for early next year. We also requested clarification of what actions, if any, are being considered to bring appropriate parts of Lough Neagh into public ownership and what for the Department to do to consider to be the key complexities associated with it. The response states that the Minister's preference is community ownership and has raised this point during continual ongoing engagement with the Earl of Shaftesbury. Discussions of potential options for transferring ownership within existing legal frameworks and through new legislation have taken place, but the immediate focus of the Department remains upon tackling the pollution and implementation of the Lough Neagh Action Plan. The Lough Neagh Partnership is working on a 2-year Lough Neagh Heritage Resilience project, which will include the feasibility of acquiring and transferring ownership of the bed and soil to the public or community ownership. The project's long-term plan is due to be published later this month. Members, any comments? Or are you content to note? Content to note, thank you, members. Item number 3, referred to page 4 of table papers, to correspondence from the Department dated 20th of November, providing an update on the AFBI data breach. The committee had requested that it be kept up to date with developments and requested an oral briefing. The Department states a draft report from the independent investigation is currently under consideration by AFBI's senior management team and board. Officials are available to brief the committee following a conclusion of the audit and after detailed consideration of the report and its findings. On a separate but related note, the evidence provided to the committee by an unnamed source to support allegations of mistreatment of animals and poor food and hygiene standards at AFBI are now with the Minister. Members, have you any comments? Are you content to schedule an oral briefing in the new year following conclusion of the independent report? Thank you, members. Sorry? Yeah. Agenda item 8. Thank you, Clark. Okay, item number 8 is the SL1, the Bovine Genetics Genotyping Scheme Regulations. I know you'll be familiar with this, revisiting it just a bit slight error on my own part, I think. I referred to pages 96 to 109 of the pack for the SL1, the draft SR and the explanatory memorandum. I also referred to page 92 of the pack to the response from the Department dated the 7th of November to queries we raised, which we considered our meeting on the 13th of November. The Department intends to make this SR under the negative resolution procedure to provide with legal powers to implement the Bovine Genetics Genotyping Scheme. You will recall on the 25th of November we received an oral briefing from officials on the overview of the Bovine Genetics Project, which is one of the key components in the Farm Support and Development Programme. The committee were also briefed on the SL1 at that meeting and we were broadly supportive of the scheme, but some members had concerns regarding communication of the scheme and the connections to conditionality, and that if it became compulsory in the future it may impact on farm payments. The committee sought clarity relating to the Department's future intentions regarding the voluntary nature of the scheme and if there are any plans to make participation mandatory in the future. The committee noted the Department's response at our meeting on the 13th of November, and apologies from the clerk and myself, the question should have been put at that point. So members, are you agreed that the Department proceed to make the SR and we can then consider it and the SR report in due course? We didn't take it that time in that last meeting.
The SR, what if we do?
I said we're going to consider it. So the SL1, the Bovine Genetics Genotyping Regulation Scheme. We content?
Yeah.
Thank you, members. Okay. Members, agenda item 9, legislative consent motion, the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Bill. Members are referred to page 111 to 116 of the pack to the clerk's memo, providing a summary of the LCM for the bill, which was introduced in the House of Commons on the 10th of September. I also refer you to a copy of the research briefing of the bill, starting at page 117, correspondence from the Department dated 26th of November, providing an update on the progress of the bill, starting at page 150, copy of the legislative consent memorandum, starting at page 153, and a departmental written briefing dated the 2nd of December, starting at page 8 of the table papers. The bill will provide the legal framework for the United Kingdom to fully implement its international obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. Don't know how to shorten that into the BBNJ agreement, but they did. Brilliant. The bill amends the Marine and Coastal Access Act 2009 and the Marine Works Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2007 to align the marine licensing regimes with the BBNJ EIA process in respect of activities in areas beyond national jurisdiction, also known as the high seas. As the LCM was led on the 24th of November, our scrutiny period of 15 days from that takes us up to the 12th of December. Did the committee agree to support the Minister in seeking the Assembly endorsement of the legislative consent motion? Thank you, members. Agenda item 10 is an SI, the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Amendment Order. Refer to page 18 to 49 of your table papers for the SI and the explanatory memorandum. The Minister has given consent for the draft order to be led under the draft affirmative resolution procedure and will make amendments to the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Order 2020, which will establish the UK Emissions Trading Scheme, which is the ETS. It makes a number of technical changes to the free allocation calculation for the next allocation period from 2027. That is the free allocation, the main policy instrument through which carbon leakage risk is currently addressed in the UK. It also sets out the pathway to further reform and align with the introduction of the UK Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism in 2027 and designed to ensure that free allocation continues to provide support to the UK industry during the transition to net zero. The committee is expecting an oral briefing from officials on the 15th of January. Do you have any comments, or is there any additional information the committee seeks, or are you content that we consider it further at that oral briefing on the 15th of January? Content? Thank you, members. Agenda item 11 is correspondence. I propose to deal with correspondence by exception, and there is correspondence memo for reference at page 196 of the pack, and I'm asking if members are content to note the correspondence as presented. If any members have any comments, I can summarise the content of that particular correspondence. Are you content that we note it?
Yep.
Thank you, members. Okay. We are now at agenda item 12, and that is any other business. Is there any other matters of business any member wants to bring up? No? Okay. Agenda item 13 is the date and time and place of next meeting. The last committee meeting of this year will take place on Thursday the 11th of December 2025 at 10 a.m. in room 21, where we will progress an update on our scrutiny of the dilapidation bill from Glenda and Bovine. I'm pleased to say that NILGA are confirmed for next month, and we expect to hear back from Solace following their committee meeting yesterday. The informal consultation closes tomorrow, and to date we have had 94 responses, which is pretty darn good. Members, the meeting is now adjourned.